"You will of course be seated beside Prudence," said Lady Ashworth, steering the Duke of Darrowby toward her celebrated elder daughter with the practiced force of a woman docking a ship, "for I know a man of your discernment will wish to spend the evening with the loveliest girl in the county." And the Duke, whose eyes had already found and would not leave the other daughter, the plain one standing forgotten by the window, thought that he had never in his life met a mother so certain of a thing so entirely wrong. He had come to Ashworth Hall to court. That much was true, and the whole county knew it. The Duke of Darrowby, Gabriel Reeve, 36, unmarried, in possession of one of the great fortunes of the North, had let it be understood that he was at last looking for a wife, and the mothers of 3 counties had gone very nearly to war over the news. It was universally agreed that if the Duke came to Ashworth, he came for Prudence Ashworth, the beauty, golden and dazzling, whose face had been painted twice 100 times, and whose younger sister Charlotte was so thoroughly eclipsed that most of the neighborhood, asked directly, would have needed a moment to recall she existed. Gabriel had come expecting to be dazzled. He had rather been looking forward to it. Instead, within 10 minutes of entering the drawing-room, he had found the celebrated Prudence to be exactly as advertised, beautiful, poised, and about as interesting as a well-made porcelain figure, saying charming things she had plainly said 100 times before, her lovely eyes flicking constantly to the mirror over the mantel to confirm the effect she was having, and in the same 10 minutes he had noticed the other one. Charlotte Ashworth stood at the window in a plain grey gown, a little apart from the glittering knot around her sister, and she was not looking at the Duke, nor at the mirror, nor at anyone. She was looking out at the darkening garden with an expression of such quiet, private amusement that Gabriel found himself desperate to know what she was smiling at. When at last he engineered his way to her side, no small feat, with Lady Ashworth trying to tow him elsewhere every 30 seconds, he asked her, "I was watching your groom try to court the kitchen maid by the pump," Charlotte said, without preamble, still half smiling. "He has been at it a quarter of an hour and made no progress whatever, because he keeps telling her how fine your horses are, when anyone can see she has no interest in horses and a great deal of interest in whether he can make her laugh. He is courting the wrong thing entirely." She glanced up at him then, grey eyes frank and clear. "It is a very common error, I find. People court what they think they ought to want, and never notice they are boring the object of it half to death." Gabriel Reeve looked at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, a real laugh surprised out of him, the first genuine sound he had made all evening. "Yes," he said, "I rather think it is." They understood each other perfectly, and at once. It was the strangest sensation, as though he had walked into a crowded, glittering room full of people performing at him, and found, in the corner by the window, one person who was simply restfully real. Charlotte did not flatter him. She did not glance at the mirror. She did not say a single thing she had said before. She teased him about his own reputation, gently and accurately. She argued with him about a book. She told him, when he asked what she did with her days while her sister was being admired, that she kept the estate's accounts and the sick tenants' remedies and half the parish's secrets, because a girl no one looks at learns a great deal about everyone who does not think she is listening. "And what have you learned about me listening?" Gabriel asked. "That you are bored," Charlotte said simply. "That you came here expecting to be enchanted by my sister and are disappointed, and are too well-mannered to show it, and are consequently having a perfectly wretched evening pretending. That you have laughed exactly once since you arrived, just now, and looked astonished to hear yourself do it, which tells me you do not laugh nearly enough, and that whatever you are looking for in a wife, it is not another mirror to admire yourself in." She tilted her head. "How am I doing?" "Unnervingly well," said the Duke of Darrowby. Lady Ashworth, watching from across the room with mounting alarm, saw the disaster unfolding and moved to avert it. She descended upon them, all fluttering apology, and detached the Duke by main force and deposited him once more at the side of the radiant Prudence, and steered the conversation firmly toward her elder daughter's accomplishments, her singing, her dancing, her taste, her face. Gabriel bore it with courtesy for the better part of an hour. Prudence sang. He was assured repeatedly exquisite. He watched Charlotte across the room, quietly helping an elderly guest to her seat, and thought that he had never in his life been so certain of anything. The next day he called again, and the next. Lady Ashworth received him each time in a fever of triumph, certain the great match was all but made, and each time contrived to keep Charlotte busy elsewhere, sent to the still room, dispatched on errands, seated at the far end of tables, while prudence was displayed to best advantage. The Duke of Darrowby permitted all of it with perfect patience, and each time found a way, before he left, to speak 10 minutes alone with the daughter no one was trying to sell him. Those 10 minutes, he came quickly to understand, were the only part of the day he lived for. On the third of those visits, he found Charlotte in the walled garden, cutting late roses for the sick room of a tenant's mother, and he stayed and held the basket while she worked, and they spoke for an hour of nothing that would have interested her mother in the least, of the tenant's fever, of a book of Gabriel's boyhood, of the peculiar loneliness of being wanted for everything about oneself except oneself. "You know a great deal about that," Charlotte observed, snipping a stem, "for a duke." "So do you," said Gabriel, "for a girl no one looks at." She glanced up at him, and something passed between them in the scent of the roses and the low gold of the westering sun that neither of them named, but both of them understood. He rode home that evening knowing, past any further pretending, that he was not going to marry Prudence Ashworth, and that he had known it since the first 10 minutes, and that every hour spent letting the county believe otherwise was an hour wasted from a life he suddenly, urgently, wanted to spend elsewhere. It could not go on. On his fourth visit, when Lady Ashworth had assembled the family in the drawing-room in the evident expectation of an announcement, the Duke of Darrowby made one. "Lady Ashworth," he said, "you have been most generous in your hospitality, and I owe you plain speaking in return, for I have let you labour under a mistake, and it does you no credit to be surprised by what I am about to say." He inclined his head toward the golden elder daughter. "Miss Ashworth, your accomplishments are everything the county claims, and you will make some fortunate man an admired and admiring wife, and I wish you very happy. But it is not you I have come here to ask for." The silence in the room was absolute. Prudence's lovely face went slack with disbelief. Lady Ashworth made a sound like a kettle. Gabriel crossed the room to the window, where Charlotte stood in her plain grey gown, gone very still. "It is you," he said only to her, as though the crowded staring room had emptied. "It has been you since the first 10 minutes, when you told me I was courting the wrong thing entirely, and you were right, and I have been trying to court the right thing ever since. Your mother has spent 4 days steering me toward the loveliest girl in the county, and I have spent 4 days evading her to reach the only interesting one. You told me people court what they think they ought to want and bore themselves half to death. I have no intention of doing that. I know precisely what I want, and I am looking at her, and she has been standing by this window the whole time, seeing everything and being seen by no one." His voice gentled. "I should like very much to be the one who sees you, Charlotte, for the rest of my life, if you will have me. Not the celebrated sister, not the face the county toasts. You, one who watches and understands and made me laugh out loud in a room full of people who only ever made me tired. Marry me." For a long moment Charlotte Ashworth could not speak. The whole shape of her small overlooked life was tilting on its axis, and she, who was never surprised, who saw everything coming, had not seen this, and her eyes filled. "You are certain," she managed. "You have seen Prudence. Everyone chooses Prudence." "Then everyone has been remarkably foolish," said the Duke, "and I intend to profit by their folly for the rest of my days." He took her hand. "I am not everyone, Charlotte. I have spent my whole life being wanted for my title and admired for my fortune, by lovely people saying lovely things they did not mean, and I was so weary of it I nearly gave up the notion of marrying at all. And then a girl in a grey gown by a window told the truth about myself before I had learned her Christian name, and I have not been bored or lonely for one single minute since. Do you imagine I would trade that for a face? Say yes. I have never wanted anything the way I want you to say yes." "Yes," Charlotte whispered, and then, with a shaken laugh, "Yes, of course, yes, you absurd man. I have been trying not to hope for it for 4 days. The Ashworth family was, that evening, most thoroughly humbled. Lady Ashworth, who had spent Charlotte's whole life treating her as the lesser daughter, the useful one, the one who kept the accounts while her sister was admired, found her overlooked girl elevated in a single hour to a duchess, the highest match the family had ever made or would ever make. While her celebrated Prudence, passed over before the whole assembled county, was left to a beauty suddenly gone sour in her own mouth, it was Charlotte, in the end, who was gracious about it, for she had a generous heart and no wish to gloat. But the neighborhood was not so kind. And for years after, the great cautionary tale of 3 counties was of the mother who paraded her beauty at a duke and never noticed he had fallen in love with the daughter she kept in the still room. Prudence, for her part, learned the lesson slowly and hard. She had been raised to believe her face was fortune enough, and she had never in her life troubled to be interesting, because no one had ever required it of her, and now she had been passed over before the whole county, for the sister she had spent her life ignoring. It stung her for years. But there is a rough justice in such things, and in time even Prudence came to see that the Duke had not slighted her beauty so much as looked straight through it to something her beauty had never let anyone look for, and that Charlotte, who had been given nothing to trade on but her wits and her kindness, had made of them a match no painter's face could win. It was, the neighborhood agreed, the most instructive courtship in living memory, proof that a man of real discernment, given a room full of dazzle, will walk past every glittering thing in it to reach the one quiet soul who sees him true. Gabriel married her that autumn and carried her north to Darrowby, and the marriage was, from its first day to its last, exactly the restful, laughing, real thing he had glimpsed a crowded drawing-room. Charlotte kept his accounts and his tenants' secrets, and, before long, half the Norths, for a duchess no one had thought to look at twice, turned out to see and understand a very great deal. And the Duke of Darrowby, who had spent 36 years being admired by people who bored him, spent all the years that followed being known, truly known, to the depths, by the one person who had bothered to look past every glittering thing in the room and see the man standing behind the title. He never once regretted his choice, nor wondered what the celebrated sister might have been. He had chosen with his eyes open, in a room that expected him to choose otherwise, and every day of the rest of his life confirmed him in it. The plain one, the overlooked one. The girl by the window whom no one saw. She had seen him first, and he had seen her at last and loved her for the whole of what she was, and counted himself, to the end of his days, the luckiest man in 3 counties for having had the wit to look where no one else was looking.